Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined today by Charley Moore, who's the founder and CEO of Rocket Lawyer. Hi, Charley.
Hi, Caroline. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for joining me. It's good to have you here. There's a lot going on with you.
I guess that's an understatement. It's a lot of fun.
So we're here to talk about, let me introduce Rocket Lawyer for anyone who doesn't know, but we're here to talk about some exciting developments with you being involved in the Sandboxes in Arizona and Utah. But just in case anybody isn't familiar with Rocket Lawyer, you've been going since 2008, and it's an online platform. You help consumers to create legal documents, and you connect them with attorneys or lawyers in the UK. And you're global, right? Is that fair assessment?
You got it.
So you're the only company, I think, that's involved in Arizona and Utah. They've launched Sandbox, which means that they're trialing effectively different types of regulation. And I think I'm right in saying that you're the only company that's involved in both. Is that right?
So far, it looks that way. Yeah. As well as, we started, of course, on that journey with the SRA in the UK, and of course Utah based a lot of its reforms on what Rocket Lawyer was able to do in the UK. So we've got some history with this. Yeah,
no, and I'm really looking forward to coming on to talk about how the UK perhaps is helping in terms of the roadmap. But so tell us first of all. So Arizona, I'm going backwards because I think Arizona was the second where you got your applied for a license. So I'm going to start with Arizona and then come on to Utah. But so what's the state of play? You've applied for an alternative business services license, or you've been granted one? I wasn't sure.
So in Arizona, we've applied. It hasn't been granted yet, but we expect it will be.
Okay, there's not really any question about. I presume they've kind of opened up. They've created the circumstances now, haven't they, where they're encouraging people to apply. So, and I'm sure that okay. So in the UK, we've long talked about alternative business structures or ABSs, and as you say, you've been involved from the outset. But what does that mean in Arizona? What does that mean within the context of the United States? Is it the same thing? What does ABS actually mean?
Yeah. So it means it's very similar. Like I started out, the UK really pioneered this type of reform, allowing for non-lawyer ownership of legal services. And so it's very similar to the structure in the UK. You apply. Rocket Lawyer, of course, is a software company, and we're a corporation. We're a Delaware corporation. We're not a partnership, and so that's really unprecedented in the United States. The precedent again is really the UK.
Okay, yeah. So where ABS means you can provide legal services, which obviously you do. But they have, and this is generically, so an ABS means that you provide legal services, but it can have non-lawyer ownership, managers, or decision makers, right? So they're kind of opening up to all three. So it might be that you can get for example, outside investment, or have non-lawyers managing it, which to date has not been the case in the US, has it?
That's right. Again, we're a for-profit corporation with equity investors that themselves are non-lawyers, so that's new, and we're able to employ lawyers directly who are employees of Rocket Lawyer, and they represent clients. And so it really changes the game in a tremendous way. It's enabling us to really use our software expertise to reimagine the workflow, the attorney-client workflow, and ideally make it, more delightful experience. You don't hear that applied to client-attorney very often, but to make it a very delightful experience, just like other experiences that people have now that are this hybrid combination of technology and people.
Delightful is not often a word, you're right. Delight. But it should be, I'm sure. Fine. So, and what does it mean to you to be, so I read something interesting actually about what it means for Rocket Lawyer to be involved in either sandbox. It said it means you can innovate without fear of getting sued. I quite liked that description. Is that a fair summary? Does it mean it gives you the freedom to kind of start playing around with different, I guess, as you said, the UK sets a precedent, but it gives you the opportunity to start playing around and without fear of recrimination.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm the last, and we at Rocket Lawyer would be the last ones in the world to ever dissuade someone from using the legal system, right? The legal system is still the heart and soul of what we do. What we're really trying to do is make access to justice, access to the tools of justice, more affordable and affordable for everybody. And we're doing that with technology. You have to be able to scale. Anybody can make 1 cup of coffee. Starbucks can make 1 billion cups of coffee. And when you go to Starbucks in London or you go to Starbucks in San Francisco, you're getting the same, venti mocha cappuccino or whatever it is. That's the kind of consistency and efficiency that we want to apply to the law. And you can only do it with natively digital solutions. And you need a business model underpinning that allows for what you were just talking about, which is iteration, innovation. Most things fail. And so you have to be able to try, new services, to try different user experiences. One way that I have described, or we describe what we're doing, is putting a different user interface in front of the legal industry, a user interface that's delightful and similar to services that people love. And you can Netflix, for example, service people love. We want people to love interacting with the legal system as much as with a Netflix or a Snap or some of these other really delightful UI. But you've got to be able to experiment, fail, iterate, and the ABS model is much more suited to that kind of experimentation.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So let's talk about the UK a little bit. So I know we've met in the UK before. You've been practicing a lot. That people have been in existence a long time. Tell me some of the ways. I mean, is it very straightforward? How are you operating in the UK that perhaps will then be work as an example or a roadmap in the US?
Great question. In the UK, we have a hybrid model. So let's just start with attorney services. We have a hybrid model. We have an independent network of lawyers out there, solicitors in the UK, who work with clients as independent attorneys, and they use the Rocket Lawyer software platform to help them engage better with those customers. And that works really well. Since the SRA gave us the authorization several years ago now, we also have what we call in-house solicitors and in-house lawyers who are our employees, and and we've been able to perfect a model where we can do initial client intake, we can handle really routine matters with our in-house lawyers, and then the independent solicitors are getting sort of higher level matters. They're getting clients that have already been vetted, and so that makes their practices more efficient. And so it's really worked very, very well in the UK. It's growing fast. I'm proud of the fact that while several competitors have stumbled in the UK, we've been part of the UK legal community now for 7 or 8 years, and have really I think, become a part of the fabric there, and I think we'll do the same in Utah and Arizona. I'll tell you, 1 in 9 American adults has a Rocket Lawyer account today. It's more than 30 million people, and so that should show that the kind of affordable, digitally native experience that we offer is resonating with people. Definitely. It's what they want.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to hear. You know, that's your model has really grown, because I've been writing about the legal sector for a long time, and it's interesting how you've evolved it. You know, and especially that in-house side of things. That I guess is where the deregulation will really come to play, because they've got this sort of real hybrid role, haven't they? And I guess they're the ones that are probably they're the ones that are interacting with the tech side of things, like in terms of injecting their knowledge, working that sort of hybrid, using their knowledge in order to help sort of grow your sort of the digital side of it. Is that right?
Yeah. For us, it starts with either our mobile apps or our web apps. So every single Rocket Lawyer customer is using, digital tools to begin with. So the lawyers, our in-house lawyers, of course, are aware of that, and they're interacting in the same apps with those customers, with those clients. Increasingly, the independent lawyers are also interacting with the same digital documents in the cloud, using the same sort of communication tools that are on platform. And that's a lot of the product roadmap that we're executing on now, is providing more and more tooling for that really consistent 100% digital workflow between clients, lawyers, and even third parties.
Yeah. Okay. So oh, I know. So is there a risk, I was going to ask you, that with what's happening in Arizona and Utah, that they will, because these are called sandboxes, right? I think when the SRA, we spent
Arizona, actually.
Pardon?
Not in Arizona, actually. Arizona is permanent. Oh, it's not a sandbox.
Okay, so lots of people have been calling it sandbox. Okay, that's interesting. So in Utah, the sandbox was initially for 2 years, and then they've extended it by 5 years. So does that make a big difference? Do you think is there any fear over you making changes and I guess, being honest, costs and all the rest, and then it doesn't come to anything? Is that a concern?
Not at all. Back to, we have a culture, and I think that's another thing around being a software company. We know that most things fail, so we're built for failure, and I think that's one of the reasons why our companies manage to grow, because failure is one of the 10 principles that we educate every employee on, is how to fail, and not that you fail sometimes, you fail most of the time, and so that's where having a structure where real software companies can engage in legal innovation, including innovating the client attorney workflow, is it really reduces the risk that we will ever modernize that client attorney workflow, because it is going to be mostly failure and occasional success, and so that's what we're built for. In Utah, I think they understand that, and I'm really impressed, and I applaud the Utah Supreme Court for recognizing it. They just extended the sandbox for 7 years, and so 7 years is an eternity in software development. And so that's more than that is. I really applaud it. That gives business enough time to be willing to, to use a baseball metaphor, to take a bunch of swings and strike out most of the time, and hopefully hit at least 1 or 2 home runs over the next 7 years, and that's what we're going to be doing.
It's so different to law firms, right? Like, you used to be an attorney, and you've been immersed in the industry forever, and it's just such a different mentality, and I think this is where a lot of law firms are really struggling, is that and there's been a lot of talk of it at conferences, and I don't see, being honest with you, a huge amount of progress. They're sort of creating different models where perhaps they can fail, but it's just the culture is very different, isn't it? You don't hear a law firm really say it's okay for us to fail.
Well, we love to partner with attorneys and firms, look, at the end of the day, we created Rocket Lawyer to make it make it possible for more people to engage with lawyers. Like, that's our mission. Our mission is to make it possible for more people to engage with licensed attorneys. There's a huge latent demand for legal services, and technology is how to unlock it. And so I think recognizing core competencies and strengths is also one of the tenets of business success. And so we love working with law firms and attorneys who are excellent at practicing law. And the quid pro quo is we have to be excellent at software development and commercializing software that's going to be delightful for customers. And so I think there's a symbiotic opportunity there. There has been so far. We have lots and lots and lots of lawyers who are valued partners.
Yeah, I bet. So yeah, I think I don't think there's an awful lot different. I mean, Utah's further down the line, isn't it? And I don't know if there's any significance of them that they've created a legal paraprofessional role. Is there any significance in that for you particularly, or not really?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The paraprofessional is another, I think, really key factor in achieving the overall mission, which is increasing access to justice and to the tools of justice. And so for most people, thank goodness, it's not, whether you're going to go to prison or not, things like that. With justice, for most people, it's can you put your affairs in writing so that your kids don't have to go through probate, right? For most people, justice involves family law, prenups, divorces, things like that. For most businesses, justice is, can you incorporate your business and get limited liability protection for your small business? And can you navigate immigration and all the plethora of compliance rules that are out there? That's the definition of justice, fair administration, law, and authority in the Webster's Dictionary. That's the definition of justice that we seek to make real for people with technology. And so a paraprofessional is an absolutely valuable ingredient in that equation, just the same as a nurse practitioner is really important to democratizing access to healthcare. And because I think the hopeful and awesome way to look at this is, again, we're increasing the size of the market, and that I know. Rocket Lawyer's been around for more than a decade. 1 in 9 Americans has a Rocket Lawyer account at this point. It's bringing people in to the market for legal help and legal services who were either priced out of it or intellectualized out of it, or both, with the old way that things were done. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really enthusiastic and excited about these paraprofessionals. We also, just on a macro sense, Carolyn, and sorry to be long-winded, but on a macro sense, doing things that are right for society, it's so, there's always this question of whether technology is replacing jobs or what have you. This is, in our industry, it's a prime example of there's more help that's needed. It's just got to be delivered in a way that people can afford it. And then you're going to get millions and millions more documents created. Well, what happens when you have millions to all those lawyers who are a little self-interested? Fine. What happens when you have millions and millions more contracts in the world? You're going to have millions and millions more disputes. And so having a paraprofessional that can navigate people through getting a business that's now not extra legal anymore. That business isn't a sole proprietorship. It's an incorporated entity. It's got regulatory compliance. As a result, it may get funded. It may grow more. The economy is going to grow. That's going to create a bigger market for the more complex cases and controversies that the sort of traditional legal system we have now is built for. There's going to be more of it, not less of it, by democratizing the beginning points of the legal system, which is what we do.
Absolutely. Do you know, I heard, I have a weekly panel chat with a bunch of other journalists, and we talk about much more interesting topics, as in, like, I write quite a lot of legal tech stuff, but we talk about justice and all that kind of stuff. And we just said access to justice is about delivering justice to people legal advice to people who need it, right? And our preconceptions about what A to J means sometimes are quite narrow, but actually it's very wide, really, when you look at who can actually afford legal advice. So let's talk about...
We've just gone through this massive pandemic and this global crisis where basically every country in the world had some form of relief that was confusing and bureaucratic, et cetera. And imagine if this legion of paraprofessionals was available to people and businesses to help them navigate through some of the regulatory issues of this particular crisis that we just went through. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And I think we end up leaving our kids with a more democratized, more fair system by enacting the reforms that are happening in our generation. Yeah,
I was going to ask you about the pandemic. So I know that, for a start, you raised, this year's been a big year, the last 12 months, not just pandemic, you raised 223 million in financing just a few months ago. So I suppose I'd had two questions before we start running out of time. So I suppose one, what do we have any sort of, do you have anything planned, like, imminently, that's any change? What can we expect? And also, I was curious about the pandemic as to whether you saw any kind of acceleration, or in terms of people using your services, what kind of impact it had.
Yeah, worldwide, we've seen a desperate, immediately, in 2020, it went from sort of a cutting edge or even bleeding edge adoption curve for basic legal tech, digital documents, e-sign, things like attorney advice online. I went from sort of a cutting edge adoption to a desperate adoption, right? Because you no longer had physical presence as an option. Physical presence as an option overnight went away in 2020. And as a result, you needed solutions that kept the lights on and kept things moving forward without the need for physical presence. And that's exactly what we do. And so for sure, we saw an acceleration in adoption of natively digital legal documents in the cloud, especially digital signatures. So our Rocket Sign product, we saw massive adoption of that, and mobile, right? Again, what folks lose track of is most people don't use a PC. Those of us who are office workers sort of assume that everybody's like us, but most people in the world don't ever touch a PC. They don't even own one. And so all of these things really took off, but they're not going back the other way. That's typical of technology. Once you start running on a treadmill with music in your ears, you just don't not do that anymore. And so that's the way it is with technology. Once you're using digital documents, you don't go the other direction again. So that acceleration has been terrific. And in terms of the other, and I think lastly, it just compacted the adoption curve. It brought it forward. You look at a place like even Brazil, the adoption curve of digital signatures, or even Europe, which has been much slower to adopt digital signatures in the U.S. It's just brought it forward, I think, by a number of years, depending on where around the globe you're talking about. Laws were changed, protectionist sort of laws were changed, et cetera. And so they're not going to go back the other direction. As far as what we're going to do with our funding, we're profitable. We've been profitable for some time, and growing. So we've been able to fund innovation and R&D from operations for quite a while. And so, we'll continue to do that. What we've been investing in are tools like RocketSign. I'm very proud of the fact that our employee benefits business, I'm very proud of the fact that hundreds of thousands, almost 500,000 people in the United States now get legal benefits from Rocket Lawyer as an employment benefit. So it's free for them. Their employer pays. Great companies like Pfizer and Salesforce and others are providing this legal benefit. And what's more in line with the mission of making democratizing access to justice, then it becomes a free benefit of employment like healthcare, for example. So I'm really proud of that, and we're just going to continue to grow that part of our business here and elsewhere. And lastly, the platform itself. Back to the question you asked, Carolyn, about law firms. We're building a platform, and yes, we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that platform, so that the industry can leverage it and leverage our APIs. There's really no need for a law firm to build its own digital signature solution. They can leverage our APIs for that, or legal documents, or even attorney advice. The really neat, I think, Q&A service, that I think is the easiest on-ramp ever to attorney advice. 600 character question, 1,200 character answer back. I can certainly see law firms integrating that in with their own services, but there's no reason to rebuild it any reason in any way, shape, or form. Like there's no reason for a small business to build Amazon. They can sell through Amazon, or they can sell through Shopify or others. They can a law firm can leverage Rocket Lawyer for that purpose. And so that's a lot of what we're going to work hard on, is to make Rocket Lawyer a very easy on-ramp to digital legal services for existing firms.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. And just lastly, I know I've got to let you go, but yeah, so you're already seeing more firms engage in that way. I mean, you're right. So there's such an interesting development in terms of there's still the kind of build, buy, however you structure it. But the pandemic has created some very interesting new trends. But are you seeing more firms engage direct in that way?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're that's what we're getting after every single day.
All right. Well, look, Charley, it's been great talking to you, and I'm grateful for you chatting to me today. Thank you.